The calm before the storm. Studio lights were too bright. That's the first thing Keanu noticed when he walked onto the stage. Not because they hurt his eyes, but because they felt fake. Everything looked perfect, too perfect. The stage was shiny, the chairs spotless, the cameras moved like they were alive. But none of it felt real. He had done hundreds of interviews before, but today felt different. He wasn't there to promote a movie. He wasn't there to talk about fame, or action scenes, or the latest franchise reboot. Today, he had come to talk about something much deeper. Something human. The host was already sitting, legs crossed, notes in hand. Her smile was polite, but sharp. Behind the smile was a tension that buzzed like electricity. Her name was Lara. She was famous for her viral moments, for her fierce questions, and the way she often left guests speechless. She didn't like to lose control, and today, she was ready for a show. Keanu greeted her with a gentle nod and sat down. He wore a simple dark shirt and jeans, like he had just walked in off the street. No stylist, no team behind him, just himself. Lara looked straight into the camera as the countdown ended. "Welcome back to Truth Pulse Live," she said smoothly. "Today, we have an actor who needs no introduction, but maybe he needs a little reminding. Mr. Reeves, thank you for joining us." Keanu smiled, his voice soft. "Thank you for having me." The first few questions were easy, about his recent charity work, his travels, his love of motorcycles. The audience laughed and clapped when he spoke about fixing an old bike in a garage in France. It was warm, even charming. But then, Lara's tone shifted. "Keanu," she said, leaning forward, "you've been described as humble, kind, and grounded. Yet, you've stayed mostly silent on today's social issues. In an era where silence is violence, do you feel you're doing enough?" The question was sharp, and the room suddenly got colder. The crew leaned in. The audience grew quiet. The viewers at home probably sat up straighter. Keanu paused, not because he was unsure, but because he wanted to choose his words carefully. He looked at Lara, not with anger, not with fear, but with patience. "I think doing enough starts with listening," he said softly, "not just reacting." Lara blinked. "So are you saying those who speak out are just reacting?" He shook his head. "No. I'm saying sometimes, in the rush to speak, we stop hearing each other. Kindness is not always loud. Respect doesn't need a spotlight." There was a silence, not the awkward kind, the heavy kind, the kind that makes people feel something without knowing why. Lara tried again. "But don't you feel a responsibility to take a stance, especially with your influence?" Keanu leaned back in his chair, hands resting gently on his lap. "I take a stance every day. When I treat the person serving coffee with the same respect I give a president. When I help someone who can't help me back. When I walk away from money if it means keeping my soul. I think the loudest stance is how we treat people when no one's watching." There was a murmur in the studio. One of the cameramen whispered, "Ho," without realizing his mic was still on. The audience caught it. Lara heard it too. "So you're saying, what, that real change happens in silence?" Her voice had lost some of its edge. She wasn't used to this kind of resistance, this kind that didn't fight, didn't shout, didn't push back. It just stood calmly, unshaken. Keanu didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He nodded gently. "I'm saying that if we want the world to be softer, we have to start being soft with each other, even when we disagree." Lara's eyes narrowed slightly. "Isn't that a little too convenient? It sounds nice, but is it enough?" Keanu took a breath. His voice, still soft, now carried something deeper, something older. "I once met a man on a bus," he said. "He was dirty, tired, and no one would sit next to him. I did. We spoke for 10 minutes. He gave me a piece of advice that changed how I see everything. That man will never trend online. No camera caught what he said, but he saved me that day, not with a protest, not with a headline, with quiet honesty." The room was still. Lara looked down at her notes, then back up. "But don't you think that kind of story lets powerful people off the hook?" Keanu's voice didn't rise, but something about it became firmer. "Maybe the real power is learning that we all have something to learn. That includes me. That includes you. Maybe being woke isn't about always being right. Maybe It's about staying awake enough to hear pain that doesn't sound like your own. The silence returned. But this time, it was warm. Lara didn't know what to say. For the first time in a long time. She had no viral moment to twist, no soundbite to spin, no outrage to stir. She looked at Keanu. And for a second, just a second, something in her softened. The cameras kept rolling. But Keanu wasn't performing. He was just being. And that's what made everyone watching stop scrolling, stop typing, stop judging and start listening. A question. No one expected the applause didn't come until a few seconds after the segment ended. The director signaled a break, and the screen faded to a commercial. But in the studio, people were still processing what had just happened. Keanu hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't thrown any punches. Yet somehow, he had completely shifted. The energy of the room, the usual smirks from the backstage crew were gone. Even the makeup girl, who had been scrolling on her phone earlier, was now staring at the floor, thinking. Lara took a sip of water. Her hand trembled slightly, though she tried to hide it. For years, she had prided herself on being sharp, being bold. She asked questions others wouldn't. And if she made someone uncomfortable, well, that was the job. But Keanu didn't push back with anger. He didn't take the bait. Instead, he had shown her a mirror. And now she didn't quite like the reflection. As the crew counted down to return from break, Lara glanced toward Keanu. He was calm, like before, but there was something else in his eyes now. A quiet strength, and maybe a sadness. No, not sadness, depth. The kind that doesn't come from comfort. The kind that's been earned. And we're back, Lara said, her voice steady again. Mr. Reeves, you've spoken about humility, kindness, and listening. But in a world that's burning figuratively and literally, don't those values fall short when real action is needed? Keanu nodded slowly. I understand the question, but I think we've confused loudness with action. There are people who march, there are people who donate, people who hold signs, and people who hold hands. All of it matters, but not everyone changes the world the same way. Lara leaned in. So what's your way? Keanu paused. Then he said something no one expected. I listened to children. The room froze. Even the sound engineer turned toward him. Lara raised an eyebrow. Children. Keanu smiled. Not smugly, not playfully, but like someone who carried a secret that had saved his life more than once. Children tell the truth, he said, not always with facts, but with feeling. They see what we forget. They ask things that cut straight through all our noise. Lara blinked. What do you mean? Keanu looked down for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. A few months ago, I visited a children's hospital. Just to say hello. No press, no camera. I met a little girl named Maya, 6 years old. She was in a wheelchair, hooked up to machines, but she was smiling like she had the whole world. We talked for a while. Then she looked at me and said, why do adults forget to be nice when they grow up? The room held its breath. Keanu went on. I didn't know what to say. I just looked at her and felt ashamed, because she was right. We complicate things. We argue, label, cancel, divide. But a 6-year-old girl in a hospital bed still believes in being nice. That's power. Lara sat back. Something inside her shifted. Her next question came. Slower. But don't you think that's too simple? Keanu nodded. Yes, but maybe simple is what we need. We've tried complicated. We've built systems on fear, shame, performance. What if the answer is simpler than we think? Lara opened her mouth, then stopped. Her producer motioned frantically for her to stir things up. Push harder. This was supposed to be the clip that went viral, the one with the headline, Keanu Reeves challenged live on air. But she couldn't, not yet. Do you think people are too sensitive today? She finally asked. Keanu looked at her. There was no judgment in his eyes, only thought. I think people are too wounded, he said, and wounded people protect themselves however they can, sometimes by being loud, sometimes by shutting down others, sometimes by pretending they're strong when they're breaking inside. It's not sensitivity. It's survival. Lara exhaled sharply. The crowd behind the cameras was no longer just an audience. They were leaning forward. A few had tears in their eyes. "So what's the answer then?" Lara asked. "What should we do?" Keanu looked directly at the camera now, as if speaking to each person watching. "Stop trying to win," he said. "Start trying to understand." He didn't raise his voice, but it hit like thunder. "Stop performing kindness. Start practicing it in small ways. Ask questions without waiting to attack. Let people grow without shaming their past. And above all, listen more than you speak." Lara swallowed hard. This wasn't the interview she expected. It wasn't a debate. It wasn't a spectacle. But it was something better. It was real. "Has anyone ever hurt you with their words?" she asked suddenly. Keanu nodded. "Yes, many times." "What did you do?" "I tried to understand why they were hurting so much that they needed to hurt someone else." The room fell into a silence deeper than before, not heavy, sacred. And then, from the back of the studio, a voice called out, "Can I ask something?" Everyone turned. It was a young intern, maybe 19. She wasn't supposed to speak, but something had stirred in her. Lara hesitated, then nodded. The girl stepped forward, voice shaking. "My brother used to love your movies before he died. He said you were the only celebrity who felt real. Can I ask why you're like this? Why you're kind?" Keanu looked at her gently. "Because I know what it's like to lose people," he said. "And I know what it's like to feel invisible when you've walked through pain and you come out still choosing to be kind. That's strength, not weakness." The intern wiped her eyes. Someone in the crew clapped once, then another. Then the whole room. Lara sat in silence, her hands still on the table. She realized something. She wasn't the host anymore. She was a student. And Keanu Reeves had just become the teacher. But he hadn't come to preach. He had come to remind them all of something they had forgotten. When the past walks in. The next day, the studio's phones didn't stop ringing. Hundreds of messages poured in. Some angry, some confused, but most of them emotional, deeply emotional. People weren't just talking about the interview. They were sending full letters, voice recordings, even drawings from children. Strangers across the world were saying the same thing. "Thank you for making me feel seen." But Lara, she hadn't slept, not really. She kept replaying the moment when Keanu spoke about the girl in the hospital. His words, "Maybe being woke isn't about always being right," kept echoing in her head. She had built a career out of being right, and yet, for the first time, she felt like maybe she had missed the point. Keanu, on the other hand, was back to normal life, or at least his version of normal. He didn't stay to bask in the attention. No interviews, no tweets, no statements. He simply flew home quietly. But what he didn't know was that something unexpected was about to pull him right back into the storm. 3 days later, a letter arrived at the studio. It wasn't addressed to Lara or the producers. It had one name on it. To Keanu Reeves. Lara opened it in the control room. Curious, inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten and shaky. Uneven letters. "You saved my brother's life once, and you never knew it. Please meet me. I just need 5 minutes. AJ." The envelope had no return address, only a phone number and a location scribbled beneath the name, a bench near the river. Tuesday at 6 p.m. Lara hesitated. Her first instinct was to ignore it. Maybe it was just a fan, or someone trying to go viral. But something about the handwriting, the way the words were written, it didn't feel like a trick. After some thought, she sent the letter to Keanu's team. To her surprise, he responded the next morning with just 4 words, "I'll be there, alone." Tuesday came quietly. The sky was a soft gray, with light wind brushing the trees by the river. It wasn't raining, but the air felt heavy, like the world was waiting for something to happen. Keanu arrived 10 minutes early. He sat on the bench mentioned in the letter, hands resting gently in his lap. He wasn't nervous. He had no expectations, just curiosity. At exactly 6 p.m., a figure appeared from the path. A young man, maybe 25, wearing a worn-out hoodie and carrying a small backpack. He walked with a limp, and his eyes darted around, unsure, like someone who hadn't been seen in a long time. He stopped in front of Keanu. "Are you?" Keanu smiled softly. "Hi, I'm Keanu." The man sat down beside him, careful not to look directly into his eyes. There was a long pause before he spoke. My name is Adam. My brother's name was Josh. Keanu turned slightly. The name didn't ring a bell. About 5 years ago, Josh was in a dark place, Adam said. He didn't tell anyone, but he was planning to end his life. Keanu remained still, listening. One night, I found him on the floor, crying, shaking. He had written goodbye letters, but there was a DVD in front of him. One of your movies, The Lake House, I think. Keanu raised his eyebrows slightly. He told me later, Adam continued, that he watched it by accident. And something in your performance, the way your character talked about waiting, about believing in time, in love, he said it gave him just enough reason to wait one more day. And then one more, until he could breathe again. Keanu's eyes softened. He looked out at the river. Josh lived for 2 more years, Adam said, voice breaking. He started painting again. He laughed more, and before he passed from cancer, he told me to find you, to thank you. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves above them. Adam reached into his backpack and pulled out a small canvas wrapped in cloth. He handed it to Keanu. He painted this. He wanted you to have it. Keanu took the package gently and unwrapped it. Inside was a painting of 2 hands reaching for each other across time. The style was rough, raw, but the emotion, it was powerful, honest, pure. For a moment, Keanu said nothing. Then he placed the painting in his lap, looked at Adam, and nodded. Double quotes, thank you for sharing him with me, he said quietly. Adam wiped his eyes. You already shared so much with him, you just didn't know. There was a long pause, not uncomfortable, just meaningful. Then Adam asked a question that caught Keanu off guard. Do you believe in destiny? Keanu looked at him. I believe in connection. And maybe that's the same thing. Adam smiled for the first time, not wide, just enough. As the sky darkened, they sat there, 2 strangers linked by a silent thread neither of them had chosen but both of them needed. When Adam stood to leave, he turned back one last time. You don't just play heroes, he said. You are one. Keanu looked down at the painting, then up at the stars starting to appear. I'm just trying to be human, he replied. But thank you. And with that, Adam disappeared into the night. Back at the studio, Lara watched the security footage of Keanu sitting alone on the bench after Adam had left. He stayed for a while, just looking at the painting, thinking, breathing. She shut her laptop and whispered to herself, maybe this is the real story. What she didn't know, what no one knew yet, was that everything that had happened so far was only the beginning, because someone else had been watching that interview. Someone with power. Someone with plans. And soon, Keanu's calm voice would shake the world. When power feels threatened. Next morning, Keanu's team received an unusual call from an executive producer at one of the biggest political talk shows in America. They weren't calling to offer thanks or praise. They were calling with concern. We've had multiple advertisers ask questions about your interview, the voice said sharply over the phone. Not complaints, not yet, but they're watching closely. Your words hit some nerves, big ones. Keanu wasn't surprised, but he also wasn't afraid. His truth had reached hearts, he could feel that. But it had also touched something more fragile, something hidden in plain sight, a power structure that thrived on outrage, noise, division. And now, someone was beginning to panic. That evening, Lara received a text from her boss. Meet me in my office, now, urgent. She arrived to find her executive producer pacing. His phone buzzed non-stop. A half-eaten sandwich sat forgotten on the table. Lara, what did you do? He snapped. She blinked. What do you mean? You let him hijack the segment. You let him flip the script. Now people are saying we look like the ones with an agenda. Lara stayed calm. He didn't hijack anything. He just told the truth. People responded because it felt real. That's not how this works, the producer growled. We curate narratives. We ask questions to push reactions. We don't let someone like him turn the whole system upside down with soft words and gentle eyes. Lara crossed her arms. Maybe it needed turning upside down. The producer stopped pacing. You're going to fix this. How? We're scheduling a second interview, a live debate. This time, he's going to be challenged by someone sharper, someone who won't be swayed by stories about sick kids or sad bus rides. Lara's stomach dropped. You're going to ambush him. He walked into our space and made us look like villains. He said coldly, now we remind people who writes the script. Meanwhile, Keanu was alone in his apartment, holding the small painting from Adam's brother. He hadn't stopped thinking about it. The colors were simple, but the message ran deep. Two hands reaching across time like hope, trying to touch someone who'd already started drifting away. His phone buzzed. His assistant's voice came through. Keanu, you've been invited back for a second interview. Live. They said it would be a fair debate, but something about it feels off. Keanu didn't hesitate. Accept it, he said. Are you sure? Yes, but I won't go to debate. I'll go to speak. 3 days later, the studio was packed tighter than ever. Cameras had been doubled. The marketing team pushed out teasers on every platform. Round 2. Keanu Reeves Faces Real Questions was trending. But behind the scenes, Lara felt sick. She knew what was about to happen. They had brought in a guest co-host, a loud, aggressive social commentator named Derek James, known for cutting people off mid-sentence, forbidding guests with labels and twisting their words into hashtags. Keanu arrived calmly, dressed the same as before. No handlers, no publicist. Just a quiet presence walking into a room built for noise. Lara met him in the hallway before the show. I'm sorry, she said, eyes down. He looked at her gently. Don't be. It's not your fight. She shook her head. They're going to try to make you look weak, soft, out of touch. He smiled. Let them try. The countdown began. Welcome back, Lara said, her voice tighter than usual. Tonight, we continue a conversation that sparked emotions across the country. Joining us is Derek James, cultural commentator, and of course, actor Keanu Reeves. Derek grinned. It wasn't warm. Keanu, he began. Last time you sat here and said we should stop trying to win and start trying to understand. Sounds nice, but let's get real. The world isn't soft, it's hard. And if you're not fighting, you're losing. Don't you think your message is dangerously passive? Keanu leaned forward slightly. Voice calm. I think fighting without listening is like swinging in the dark. You might hit something, but you won't heal anything. Derek chuckled. So what, people should just be quiet, wait for change, be polite while injustice happens? Keanu's voice was steady. No, I think people should act, but act with heart, not just heat. The audience murmured. Derek pushed harder. You say you listen to children. Cute. But kids don't run governments. Adults do. Adults who deal with war, taxes, crime. Your approach is emotional, not logical. Keanu nodded. Logic without compassion is just calculation. Children may not run countries, but they remind us why we should. For a moment, Derek seemed caught off guard. But he wasn't done. He leaned in, eyes sharp. Fine. Let's say you're right. Let's say kindness changes people. Do you have proof? One real moment where your calm, quiet approach changed someone dangerous. Keanu paused. He hadn't planned to say this, but something in him opened. Yes, he said. There was a man, years ago. I won't say his name. He hated me, publicly. Called me everything from fake to coward. One day, I saw him outside a bookstore. He was alone. Looked tired. I walked up to him. I said, "Hey, I know we disagree, but I'm glad you're still here." He looked confused. Then he cried. The studio was silent. Keanu continued. He said no one had spoken to him with kindness in months. His father had just died. He was lashing out at everyone. That moment didn't make us best friends, but it reminded him that he was still human. Derek didn't speak. Lara looked at Keanu, her voice barely above a whisper. Do you think we've forgotten we're human? Keanu turned to her. I think we remember in silence, but we drown it in noise. After the show, something strange happened. The clip was uploaded like usual, but the comments were different. Thousands of people were saying the same thing. This wasn't a debate. This was a lesson. He didn't destroy anyone. He healed something. This made me call my father after 5 years. Keanu hadn't won. He hadn't shouted, accused, or humiliated anyone. But something shifted. For the first time in a long time, people weren't sharing a video to laugh at someone. They were sharing it to feel something, and someone at the top didn't like that, because real change had begun, The backlash begins the next morning. The world felt louder. Not because of applause, but because of fear. News outlets, blogs, influencers, even comedians started commenting on Keanu's second interview. Only this time, the tone had changed. Some called him out of touch. Others mocked him for preaching kindness like it's a solution to global problems. Headlines flooded social feeds. Keanu Reeves dodges real issues with emotional fluff. Is Hollywood's favorite nice guy too soft for today's world? Reeves fans worry he's lost touch with reality. It wasn't just criticism. It was organized. Keanu's social accounts began receiving coordinated attacks. Thousands of hateful comments appeared within hours. Even his old charity work was being picked apart, called performative, exaggerated, or irrelevant. Anonymous accounts tried to twist his past into something dark. They said he was too quiet during protests, too neutral during elections, too calm to trust. His team met urgently. One assistant was nearly in tears. "They're trying to erase everything you've done," she said, showing him trending hashtags meant to discredit his character. Keanu didn't flinch. Instead, he asked calmly, "Are the children's hospitals still receiving donations?" "Yes." She nodded. "Actually, more than ever." "Then we're okay," he said quietly. But behind closed doors, the pressure kept building. Studio executives started backing out of projects. A major brand quietly removed Keanu from a campaign they had promised months ago. One producer called and said, "Look, man, I respect you, but if you keep talking like this, you're going to lose the whole machine." Keanu replied with a soft laugh. "Maybe that's the point." One night, Lara called him from her car. "Keanu, you need to see what they're saying now. They're calling you weak, fake, manipulative, even dangerous." He stayed quiet for a moment. "Why dangerous?" he asked. "Because you're calm," she said, voice shaking. "And calm is harder to fight. You're not giving them outrage. You're giving them peace. And peace scares people who profit from chaos." Keanu let her words hang in the air. Then he said, "You asked me before if we've forgotten how to be human. I think now we're remembering. And it hurts." Lara sighed. "You don't have to carry this alone." "I know," he said, "but someone has to carry it first." What happened next, no one saw coming. A video surfaced, edited, fake. It showed Keanu stitched into moments he had never lived, phrases he never said, scenes altered to paint him as arrogant, dismissive, even condescending. Deepfake technology had made it look almost real. Within hours, it had millions of views. People who had never watched the real interview believed what they saw in the fake one. They began calling him a fraud, a manipulator. They said his kindness was a mask, his humility an act. Keanu's single quotes team was horrified. They scrambled to get the video taken down, but it had already spread. Mirrors of it were uploaded everywhere, and even though experts confirmed it was fake, the damage was done. Truth had been buried under the noise. Again. But then, something happened. Something the attackers didn't expect. A video response started circulating. A little girl, maybe 9 years old, sitting in a hospital bed. She held a worn DVD of a Keanu Reeves movie in her lap. Her voice was soft, but steady. "He's not fake," she said. "He came to our hospital and made me laugh when I didn't think I ever could again. He sat next to my mom and held her hand when I was in surgery. He didn't ask for pictures. He didn't even tell anyone he came. He was just nice." That video went viral too. Within 24 hours, more began to appear. An elderly man holding a photo of his late wife said, "Keanu helped us pay for her medicine when no one else would." A janitor from a film set said, "He cleaned up trash with me after filming. Even when the stars left," he said, "no job is beneath anyone." A blind teenager held up a braille letter Keanu had once sent him, saying, "He gave me hope when I had none." Real people. Real stories. The wave of hate met a tide of love, and it began to shift. Keanu refused to defend himself directly. No interviews, no public statements. He let others speak, not for his image but for something deeper. People started gathering in parks, cafes, libraries. Strangers came together, not to protest, not to fight, but to listen, to talk, to share stories without judgment. A new movement began forming. Not political, not branded, not loud, just human. They called it the Quiet Rise. Meanwhile, deep in a corporate boardroom, a group of executives stared at reports showing declining engagement. With their usual controversy-driven content, the most viewed clips now were simple moments: a father forgiving his son, a woman helping her neighbor, a child hugging a teacher. The system was breaking not because someone shouted louder, but because someone whispered longer. Keanu sat one evening by the river, the same bench where he'd met Adam. He watched the water move, slow and steady. Behind him, footsteps approached. It was Lara. She sat beside him in silence. After a while, she asked, "Did you ever think your words would change anything?" He smiled gently. "I didn't say them to change anything. I said them because they were true." She looked at him. "And if they try again to tear you down?" Keanu turned to her, his eyes full of quiet power. "Then I'll keep telling the truth," he said, "because the world doesn't need more warriors. It needs more healers." And for the first time, Lara didn't just hear him, she believed him. The moment the world listened, it began with a ripple. A school in a small town decided to cancel their debate competition, not out of fear, but to replace it with something called the listening circle. Students would sit in a room, share something personal, and no one was allowed to interrupt. They could only listen, ask one respectful question, or offer support. That small-town event reached national headlines in days. Next, a university replaced its annual political showdown with a truth and tea evening. Students from opposite sides sat at picnic tables, no stage, no microphones, just hands holding warm cups and eyes finally meeting without shields. But no one gave credit to the organizers. Everyone pointed to the interview, the Keanu shift. They called it. What began as an attempt to humiliate a man for being calm had accidentally ignited something stronger than rage, compassion. And the world didn't know what to do with it. Corporate networks tried to reclaim the narrative. A viral podcast host invited Keanu for a confrontation. "Let's break the myth," he said on his stream. "Let's bring the so-called calm man into the fire." Keanu declined. Instead, he sent a letter. It read, "We don't need more fire. The world is already burning. Maybe it's time for water, or silence, or simply sitting beside someone without trying to fix them." The host posted the letter, mocked it, laughed at it live on air. But something strange happened. His viewers didn't laugh back. Comments filled the screen. "He's right. You invited him to fight. He offered you peace. Maybe you should have listened." Within a week, that podcast lost half its sponsors. Keanu never took a victory lap. He spent the next few months doing what he always did, visiting children's hospitals in secret, riding the subway alone, tipping waiters double without ever revealing who he was. But things had changed. People began to meet his silence with their own. A stranger on the train saw him and simply nodded. A barista handed him coffee and whispered, "Thank you for teaching me to breathe before reacting." A woman in tears at a bookstore handed him a worn copy of a poetry book. "I read this because of you," she said. "It saved me." Then one day, something unexpected happened. Lara invited Keanu to a live event, not a broadcast, not a debate, just a gathering in a small community center in New York. He said yes. The room was modest, no cameras, no crew, just people sitting in a circle, firefighters, single moms, teachers, janitors. One by one, they shared stories, small ones, big ones. None were judged, none were interrupted. When it was Keanu's turn, he stood for a moment and looked around. Then he said, "Thank you for reminding me that the quietest rooms are often the most honest." He sat down. Nothing more needed to be said. Meanwhile, back in the boardrooms of television networks and influencer agencies, something terrifying happened to their business model. People stopped clicking on outrage. They started craving grace. The producers who once tried to destroy Keanu began meeting to figure out how to bottle what he had created. But they couldn't, because it wasn't his. It was ours. 1 year later, a statue was quietly unveiled in a small park near the river where Keanu once sat. Not a statue of him, but of two hands reaching across Time. No plaque. No headline. Just a symbol. Of what can happen when someone refuses to shout and instead chooses to feel. In his home, away from the spotlight, Keanu sat in his garden. A letter rested in his hands. It was from Adam. My brother's painting now hangs in a children's ward. The kids look at it and ask why the hands don't touch. I tell them, because the space between is where the love lives. Thank you for helping me understand that. Keanu smiled. Gently. He didn't change the world, but he reminded it that healing isn't loud. It's listening. It's softness. It's human. And somewhere, in the quiet corners of the internet, the words from that first interview still echo. Stop trying to win. Start trying to understand. And the world finally listened.